This quote by Carl Jung reflects a profound view of human nature and the path of inner growth. According to Jung, the period before 40 is merely preparation. It is the time when a person shapes their personality under the pressure of external circumstances, the expectations of society, family, the educational system, and career ambitions. All of this is not the true self, but merely a shell convenient for the world. But after 40, something else begins, something real. The person turns inward and steps onto the path of self-knowledge. This is not a crisis, it is an awakening. The age of 40 marks a significant threshold in the life of an individual. It is the point where the mind, body, and soul begin to look inward and reflect on the true nature of existence. For many, the first 40 years are spent conforming to the expectations of the world, to become successful, to build a career, to start a family, to accumulate wealth. This outward pursuit is driven by societal pressures, a need for validation, and a desire to feel complete within the confines of the roles that society has prescribed. But as one approaches the age of 40, the mask that has been worn for so long begins to feel heavier, and the individual begins to question whether this life, shaped by external influences, is truly theirs. At this moment, something shifts. The yearning for deeper meaning becomes undeniable. The search for self begins. The quest for authenticity emerges. In the years before 40, many live in pursuit of external markers of success, degrees, titles, achievements, material wealth. These external accomplishments are celebrated, and society rewards those who can align their lives with these goals. But after 40, the individual starts to experience an existential shift. The external success begins to lose its luster. What once seemed important, such as building a career or obtaining financial security, no longer feels fulfilling. There is an emptiness, a subtle sense of disillusionment that starts to creep in. The person might have achieved everything that society told them they needed to be happy, yet they still feel as if something is missing. This emptiness arises not from a lack of material possessions, but from a lack of connection to the self, to one's true essence. It is during this period that the inner voice, long drowned out by the noise of societal expectations, becomes louder. The individual begins to question their life's purpose, the choices they've made, and the direction they are heading. The path that once seemed clear now feels uncertain. This is the beginning of the process Carl Jung described as individuation, a journey of self-discovery and personal transformation. It is a process that takes place when the individual begins to break free from the roles they have been playing and confronts the truth of their own identity. It is not an easy journey, for it requires shedding the old self, the mask that has been worn for so long, and stepping into the unknown. But it is a necessary journey, for it is only through this process that the individual can truly awaken to their authentic self. As the individual enters their 40s, a quiet yet persistent shift begins to unfold. Life's external structure may remain intact. Work continues, relationships persist, responsibilities endure, but something internal begins to stir. It is a subtle voice, one that has long been drowned out by the cacophony of daily life. This voice asks the kinds of questions that cannot be answered with facts, figures, or societal accolades. Who am I beneath all of this? What truly matters to me? Have I been living my life, or merely performing a role written by someone else? This questioning marks the beginning of a deeper psychological process that Carl Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming whole, of integrating the many facets of the self into a unified and authentic existence. Before 40, the ego reigns supreme. We are busy building careers, families, identities. We wear masks that fit our environment and chase achievements that promise satisfaction. But the ego, for all its ambition, is only a fragment of the psyche. Jung believed that the true self lies deeper in the unconscious, and it is only through the dismantling of the ego's illusions that we can begin to approach it. This dismantling often begins with crisis, not because something has gone wrong, but because the soul can no longer be ignored. The strategies that once brought success and approval begin to fail. Relationships become strained. The work that once motivated begins to feel empty. Restlessness creeps in, accompanied by a sense of existential confusion. But this is not failure. This is a calling. The midlife awakening is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough. It is the soul's revolt against a life of surface existence. The unconscious begins to push forward symbols, dreams, emotions long repressed. Nightmares may become vivid. Long-forgotten memories resurface. Strange longings appear, longings for meaning, beauty, freedom. These are not distractions, they are invitations. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through images and symbols. It speaks not in language, but in myth. That is why dreams become so important during this stage of life. They are messages from the depths, carrying the raw material for transformation. To ignore these messages is to risk stagnation. To heed them is to step onto the path of the hero's journey, not outward, but inward. This inner journey requires courage. It means confronting the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have denied, rejected, or hidden. These may include suppressed anger, guilt, envy, or even unacknowledged talents and desires. The shadow is not evil, it is simply unconscious. When we do not face it, it acts out in destructive ways. But when we engage with it, integrate it, and accept it, we become more whole. We reclaim lost energy. We regain access to parts of ourselves that were buried in order to fit into the mold society demanded. By one's mid-40s, this confrontation with the shadow becomes more intense. Often it coincides with a growing disillusionment with the outer world. Status loses its shine. Material wealth no longer satisfies. Even relationships may feel like performances rather than true connections. The heart longs for depth, for truth, for intimacy with life itself. This is when many begin to turn inward in earnest. Meditation, journaling, therapy, time in nature. These are not indulgences, but necessities. They become the tools of excavation, the way we dig beneath the surface of our constructed lives to find the rich soil of authenticity beneath. At this stage, the concept of the anima and animus, Jung's ideas of the inner feminine and inner masculine, may emerge. For men, the anima is the inner feminine, emotional sensitivity, intuition, creativity, receptivity. For women, the animus is the inner masculine, reason, structure, assertiveness, direction. These are not gender roles, but archetypal energies. To become whole, one must integrate both. A man who rejects his anima may become emotionally rigid. A woman who denies her animus may feel lost or unable to assert herself. But when these energies are embraced, a beautiful balance is born. Around the age of 50, a subtle yet profound shift often takes place. The individual begins to let go, not out of resignation, but out of wisdom. There is a growing sense that control is an illusion and that peace lies in surrender. Life is no longer something to conquer, but something to experience. The pace slows, moments deepen. There is a turning toward presence, a reverence for the now. At this stage, many experience what can only be described as a spiritual hunger. It is not necessarily religious, but it is deeply sacred. The search is no longer for answers, but for communion with nature, with mystery, with the vastness within. Practices like contemplation, prayer, silent walks, or creative expression become pathways to the sacred. The ego no longer needs to prove itself. It can rest. And in its resting, the self emerges. The self, in Jungian terms, is not just the conscious mind, nor even the sum of all our traits. It is the central archetype of wholeness, the organizing principle of the psyche. The journey of individuation is the journey toward this self, not to become perfect, but to become complete. By the late 50s and early 60s, individuals often carry a quiet strength. They have survived joys and sorrows. They have seen the impermanence of things and have begun to cherish what endures. Kindness, connection, presence. There is a greater capacity for empathy, for forgiveness, for letting go. They have grieved their illusions and in their place have found a deeper truth. It is also a time when generativity becomes central. People want to give back, to mentor, to share their experiences not as doctrine, but as living wisdom. This is the archetype of the sage or the wise elder, not someone who has all the answers, but someone who has made peace with not needing them. They become guides, storytellers, healers, not by profession, but by presence. As one moves into the 70s and beyond, something remarkable can occur. The ego becomes translucent. Life is no longer divided into tasks and goals. It becomes a rhythm. The ordinary becomes sacred. The quiet becomes profound. This is the stage of integration. All the parts of the self, the light and the dark, the joy and the grief, the mistakes and the miracles, are gathered into a cohesive whole. There is no longer a need to become anything else. There is only being. This is the culmination of individuation, not the arrival at some perfect self, but the deep and loving acceptance of all that we are. In this stage, many find peace, not because life has become easier, but because they have become softer, more spacious, more willing to meet life on its own terms. As the journey continues through the second half of life, the relationship to meaning deepens. One begins to realize that life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The sharp lines of ambition soften into curiosity. Questions once rooted in fear, what if I fail, or what do others think, are replaced by more soulful inquiries. What gives me life? What wants to emerge through me? What do I need to let die so that something new may be born? In this stage, symbols begin to play a vital role. Carl Jung emphasized the psychological power of symbols because the unconscious does not communicate in linear language. It speaks in image, metaphor, and myth. A bird in flight, a spiral staircase, a doorway in a dream. These are not random. They are messages from the deeper self, invitations to awaken aspects of the psyche that have long been dormant. Consider the symbol of the labyrinth. Unlike a maze, the labyrinth has one path that leads to the center and then back out again. There are no wrong turns, only the winding journey inward. It is an image of individuation itself, the descent into the unknown, the encounter with the inner self, and the return to life renewed. At midlife and beyond, this is exactly what many experience, a psychological and spiritual descent that is not a failure, but a rite of passage. This descent often involves the confrontation with mortality. Around the age of 50 or 60, the reality of death becomes undeniable. Friends pass away, parents decline, one's own body begins to change. The illusion of invincibility fades. But for Jung, this awareness of death was not something to dread. It was essential to the process of individuation. To accept mortality is to finally live fully. It frees us from trivial pursuits and awakens us to what truly matters. From this encounter with death, paradoxically, new life emerges. Creativity blossoms. For many, the second half of life becomes a renaissance. People who never saw themselves as artists begin to paint. Those who once feared solitude now seek silence. Those who lived according to rules now trust their intuition. This is not regression, it is a return to the parts of the self that were left behind in the rush toward adulthood. One such part is the inner child, not the literal child, but the symbolic core of innocence, wonder, and play. Reconnecting with this inner figure is essential to healing. It brings spontaneity, forgiveness, and joy. In the first half of life, the child may have been silenced by responsibility or trauma, but in the second half, one can become the loving parent to the child within, offering safety and space for it to breathe again. At the same time, one must also come to terms with the wounded healer, the part of us that carries pain not as a burden, but as a bridge. Jung believed that true healing does not come from perfection, but from the integration of one's wounds. A person who has faced grief can sit with others in their sorrow. A person who has survived failure can mentor others with compassion. Our wounds become medicine, not by being erased, but by being embraced. The archetypes Jung described, hero, mentor, trickster, shadow, self, are not just myths. They are active forces within the psyche. In the first half of life, we may identify strongly with the hero, driven, determined, overcoming obstacles. But in the second half, the hero must give way to the sage, the one who no longer fights but understands. The trickster may visit to unsettle our certainty, reminding us not to take ourselves too seriously. Even the fool may emerge, not as someone who is ignorant, but as one who dances with the unknown, unafraid of being vulnerable. This inner transformation often leads to a redefinition of success. Success is no longer measured in accolades, but in alignment. Does my outer life reflect my inner values? Do my actions flow from my deepest truth? Am I living someone else's dream or my own? These questions guide us toward a more authentic expression of being. One powerful tool for this phase of transformation is shadow work, the conscious exploration of what we have repressed, rejected, or denied. This may involve revisiting old wounds, examining unconscious beliefs, or engaging with projections. Jung taught that what we deny within ourselves, we tend to project onto others. The enemy outside is often the shadow within. But when we reclaim these projections and own our shadow, we become more integrated and compassionate. Spirituality also deepens during this time, not necessarily in dogma, but in direct experience. Many find solace in nature, in silence, in ritual. There may be a return to ancient practices, meditation, breathwork, drumming, dream journaling, or mythic storytelling, not to escape life, but to engage with it more fully. These practices are portals to the unconscious, ways of communing with the mystery. At this stage, solitude is no longer feared but embraced. Silence is not emptiness, but a canvas. Time alone becomes sacred. Relationships evolve too, not based on need, but on resonance. One seeks not validation, but connection. Conversations become deeper. Friendships are rooted in authenticity. Love matures from passion to presence. Many also begin to engage with service, not out of obligation, but as a natural overflow. Having journeyed inward, they now extend outward, not to fix others, but to walk beside them. This is the role of the elder, not to advise from above, but to accompany from within. There is also an increasing intimacy with nature. Walks become meditations, trees become teachers, the cycles of the moon, the change of seasons, the flight of birds, all become reminders of the soul's own rhythms. There is a resonance between inner and outer landscapes. What once felt separate now feels sacredly connected. As the 70s approach, many experience a profound peace. There is less need to explain or justify. Life becomes simpler, yet more meaningful. Meals are savored. Touch is appreciated. Laughter returns. The need for control gives way to trust. One lives with a sense of grace, not the absence of pain, but the presence of acceptance. Jung often spoke of the second personality, the deeper self that lives in the unconscious and longs to be realized. In youth, this self is often hidden, buried beneath roles and expectations. But in age, it comes forward. It is not a new self, but the original one, ancient, wise, whole. To meet this self is not to become someone else, but to finally become who you were meant to be. And then at last comes the stage of integration. All that has been scattered begins to converge. The past is no longer a chain, but a tapestry. One story is not a record of failure and success, but a sacred narrative. The regrets soften, the joys linger, the heart opens. Some call this enlightenment. Others call it awakening. But perhaps it is simply love. Love for the self, for life, for the mystery that pulses through all things. As we move deeper into the final stages of life, we encounter the culmination of the individuation process, what Jung referred to as the realization of the self. This stage, often associated with wisdom, is not a place of external achievement or societal approval, but one of internal peace. Here the journey has taken us from the hustle of outward accomplishments to the quiet satisfaction of simply being. Many individuals find that their relationship with time shifts profoundly. Whereas in earlier years, time was a commodity to be spent, earned, or wasted, in later years, time becomes a precious gift. The urgency to do or achieve fades, and what remains is a deep appreciation for the present moment. This is not an intellectual understanding, but a visceral experience. The moments between breaths become sacred. Sitting in stillness, whether in nature or in the silence of one's own home, is enough. Life has already happened, and now there is only a quiet awareness of what remains. One may begin to feel more in tune with the natural rhythms of the world, aware of the phases of the moon, the changing of seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, and the ebb and flow of the tides. These natural cycles, which in earlier years might have seemed irrelevant, now become anchors. The universe itself seems to echo the truths the individual has come to understand. Life is cyclical. Birth, death, and rebirth are not only concepts in the world around us, they are principles within us as well. This phase is often accompanied by a profound connection to the eternal. For some, this takes the form of religious or spiritual exploration, as they reconnect with their faith or begin a new spiritual journey. For others, it may be an exploration of universal consciousness through deepening practices like meditation, mindfulness, or even creative expression. There is a sense that one is not just part of a family or community, but part of a larger cosmic tapestry, a vast and interconnected whole. The boundaries between self and other begin to blur, and a deep sense of unity emerges. Importantly, this period is also marked by the release of attachment. We release our grip on the roles that we once held so tightly: parent, spouse, employee, leader, and instead we embrace the fluidity of being. We realize that we are not defined by any label, but by the essence of who we are at our core. This understanding frees us from the weight of identity and allows us to experience life as it is, without the need for validation or external markers of success. As the body ages, many individuals report feeling less concerned with the physical appearance and the pressures of youth. Instead of the focus on fitness and appearance, the body becomes a temple, a vessel that carries the soul. There is no longer the need to chase after youth or vitality. Instead, there is acceptance of the body's inevitable decline and a deep appreciation for its resilience and strength. Aging becomes not something to fear, but something to embrace. The lines on the face become stories of lived experience. The silver in the hair becomes a crown of wisdom. For some, this stage represents a final surrender, a letting go of all attachments. They no longer feel the need to control life or their circumstances. This is not a resignation, but a joyful acceptance of the natural flow of things. There is no longer any need to strive or struggle. Instead, one learns to flow with life as it comes. This surrender is not passive, it is an active participation in the ongoing dance of existence. One of the hallmarks of this stage is a desire to pass on knowledge. In Jungian terms, this is often referred to as the wise elder archetype, the one who has traveled the journey and now has the insight to share with others. This is not about preaching or imposing one's beliefs on others. Rather, it is about offering wisdom through presence. The elder's role is not to provide answers, but to be a witness, to hold space for others to find their own way. In this role, one becomes a guide rather than a teacher, a listener rather than a lecturer. Many individuals also report a deep sense of gratitude at this stage in life. This gratitude is not merely for the big achievements, career success, family accomplishments, or financial security, but for the small, everyday moments that once might have been overlooked. A warm cup of tea on a cold morning, the laughter of a child, a quiet walk through the park. These small moments become rich with meaning as they represent the essence of life itself. It is in these moments that one finds true fulfillment, not in external accomplishments or accolades. In a similar vein, we come to understand that happiness is not something to be pursued, but something to be cultivated. It is not the result of external circumstances, but a state of being that arises from within. Happiness comes from knowing oneself, from embracing both the light and dark aspects of our nature, from living in alignment with our deepest values, and from appreciating the fleeting beauty of life. In this sense, happiness is less about having and more about being. This shift also brings about a transformation in one's relationships. As the need for external validation decreases, relationships become more genuine and less transactional. Friendships deepen, family bonds strengthen. There is less focus on what others can offer us and more focus on what we can offer them. Relationships are no longer driven by need or expectation, but by love, compassion, and mutual respect. We learn to listen more deeply, to offer support without judgment, and to give space for others to grow and evolve in their own way. The later years of life, then, are not a time of retreat, but a time of renewal. It is a time to rediscover the joy of living, not through external achievements, but through inner peace, gratitude, and authenticity. This is the final gift of individuation, the realization that the journey has not been about reaching some distant goal, but about unfolding the deepest, truest part of oneself. Through this process, we find a profound peace. Peace with our past, with our mistakes, with our triumphs. Peace with the reality of death, which no longer looms as a threat, but is seen as a natural part of the life cycle. Peace with the impermanence of all things, and yet a recognition that this impermanence is what makes life so precious. It is through this acceptance that we finally come to understand what Jung meant when he spoke of the union of opposites, the reconciliation of life and death, light and shadow, the individual and the collective. At the end of the journey, the self is not a distant, unattainable goal, but a lived experience. It is not something to be strived for, but something to be realized. This realization is not an intellectual achievement, but an experiential one. It is not about knowing more, but about becoming more present, more alive, more authentic, more connected to the world around us. In the final stages of life, there is a quiet surrender to the flow of life, a deep trust in the process of becoming. And with this surrender comes a profound sense of peace, a peace that transcends all external circumstances and arises from the deep well of the self. As Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This journey of becoming is not linear. It is cyclical. It is ever unfolding. And while it may look different at different stages of life, the essence remains the same. To find the courage to face ourselves, to dive into the depths of our own being, and to emerge as the person we were always meant to be. As we approach the later years of life, there is an inherent wisdom that emerges from the depths of experience. This wisdom is not born out of intellectual knowledge or external validation, but rather from the lived experiences that have shaped us over the decades. It is a wisdom that transcends the need for material success or societal recognition. In these final chapters of life, the individual comes to understand that the ultimate truth lies not in what they have done, but in who they have become. The late stages of life, often associated with aging and the inevitability of death, are paradoxically filled with a deep sense of vitality. This vitality is not the same as youthful energy or ambition. It is the vitality of the soul, the energy that comes from living authentically and in alignment with one's true self. It is a quiet, radiant energy that emanates from within, grounded in the acceptance of life as it is. In this period of life, there is an appreciation for the fleeting nature of existence. Time, once something to be spent, is now something to be savored. The urgency to achieve or accumulate fades, and what remains is an openness to the present moment. There is no need to chase after the next big thing, because all that is needed is already here. This is the wisdom of the aged soul, the ability to be fully present with what is. At this stage, there is also a profound sense of gratitude, not for the accolades, the achievements, or the titles, but for the simple moments that make life worth living. The joy of a quiet conversation with a loved one, the beauty of a sunset, the sound of birdsong in the morning, the peace found in solitude. These moments, once overlooked or taken for granted, become the essence of life itself. This gratitude extends not only to the present, but also to the past. The individual looks back on their life with a sense of acceptance, understanding that all experiences, whether joyful or painful, have played a role in shaping the person they have become. There is no longer a need to regret the mistakes or the missed opportunities. Each moment, each choice, was part of the journey. This is the wisdom that comes with age, the ability to see life as a whole, to appreciate both the light and the shadow, and to understand that all experiences are necessary for growth. In the final years of life, the individual also comes to understand the importance of connection. This is not the connection that comes from external achievements or roles, but the connection to the deeper, universal truths that bind us all. There is a recognition that we are not separate from the world around us, but an integral part of it. The boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve, and a sense of unity with all things emerges. It is during this time that many individuals begin to pass on their wisdom to the next generation. This passing on is not about imposing beliefs or giving advice, but about offering the gift of experience. The elder becomes a guide, a mentor, not through words, but through presence. They show others how to live with grace, with authenticity, and with an open heart. This process of sharing wisdom is not limited to family or close relationships. It can extend to the broader community as well. Many individuals in their later years find new ways to contribute to society, whether through volunteer work, creative expression, or simply by offering their time and energy to those who need it. It is in giving that the individual experiences a deep sense of fulfillment, for they understand that the true meaning of life lies in the service of others. And so, as life draws to its natural conclusion, there is a sense of peaceful acceptance. Death is no longer seen as a threat, but as a natural part of the cycle of existence. It is not something to be feared or resisted, but something to be embraced. The individual has lived fully, authentically, and with purpose. They have come to understand that death is not an end, but a transformation. It is the final step in the journey of individuation, the return to the source, the re-un in this final stage. There is no longer any need to prove anything to anyone. The individual has arrived at a place of deep inner peace, where they are at one with Thyon, with the divine. In this final stage, there is no longer any need to prove anything to anyone. The individual has arrived at a place of deep inner peace, where they are at one with themselves and the world around them. They have completed the journey of self-discovery, and in doing so, they have discovered the ultimate truth, that the path to happiness, to peace, and to fulfillment lies not in external achievements or validation, but in the acceptance of one's true self. As Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is the essence of the journey we have undertaken, A journey that begins with self-exploration and ends with the realization of the self. It is not a destination, but a lifelong process of becoming, of evolving, and of unfolding into the person we were always meant to be. The final message is simple. Live authentically, embrace the journey, and be at peace with yourself. The pursuit of truth, wisdom, and inner peace is a lifelong endeavor, but it is also the most rewarding one. The journey is never truly over. It simply continues, unfolding in new and beautiful ways. This is not the end of your story. It is the chapter where you finally pick up the pen, live your path, follow your inner light, and let each step lead you to what truly matters. The journey continues. To stay on this path and be part of the ongoing revelations, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey.